It's the Auburn Observer Podcast. The podcast for the people, the free edition. Dustin Ferguson here, joined by my co-pilot, per usual, Dan Beck. Hello, Dan.
Ahoy, Justin. Good to see you as we fire up the old podcasting machine.
Yeah, and where are we firing this machine up at?
We have commandeered the Wings 94.3 studio. Big shout out to our friends at Wings for letting us use the setup. Wings 94.3, your home for Auburn University athletics, including Auburn baseball as they enter the postseason. You can catch Auburn football, Auburn men's basketball, and Tiger Talk on Wings 94.3 as well in the Auburn Opelika area. You can also catch classic hits all day long. Boston, Led Zeppelin, Def Leppard, etc. on Wings 94.3. Etc. is not a band. That's just like
more. Good name, though.
That is a pretty good band. You know that is a good name for a band. But the Wings 94.3 folks really appreciate them letting us use the studio.
Absolutely. Dan, we've got some interesting stuff to talk about tonight. We're recording this on Monday night. You'll hear it on Tuesday morning at the earliest. Bruce Pearl, the annual For the Children golf event, they moved this year. It's at Lake Martin. It's usually at Willow Point, but now the newer Wicker Point was the host. And let me tell you, even if you're not a golf person, that place is ridiculous, man.
Some of the golf around the Lake Martin area, and I think it probably makes sense when you think about folks who have purchased property around Lake Martin in the last 20, 25 years.
The type of lifestyles and budgets that are at their disposal. It's personal wealth.
Yeah, it's a boom town for your golf and your pickleball and your other and et cetera. You know, more of that. But yeah, it's a couple of gorgeous golf courses up there.
Absolutely. And so we talked to Bruce Pearl for about 15 minutes on Monday afternoon before his charity golf event, as we were saying. If you're an Observer subscriber, you got the Stretch 4 newsletter on Monday afternoon covering some of these topics we're going to talk about here. Again, if you want to get a jump on that and you want to read that newsletter, or you want to be plugged in with the latest going on with the Observer, auburnobserver.com, $6 a month or $60 a year. Everything gets emailed to you as soon as it drops, just like this podcast right here. But Dan, I found it really interesting. You know, we'll talk about some of the stuff that Bruce Pearl said. It's not a ton of news. There's some really interesting insight, though, I think, in a number of areas with this roster. But I thought the theme of it that I found probably the most fascinating is Bruce Pearl said the last couple of years, they got to this time of year, this mid-May, where they do this event, and it's kind of in the heart of, post-transfer portal, pre-NBA draft, all that stuff. And he said he just was really tired. And he said today that he felt pretty good. Probably felt better than he had in the last few years. And I thought that was interesting because, if there was a time to feel pretty worn down, it would be after the grind Auburn just went through and the amount of recruiting and roster rebuilding that the staff has been able to do to this point, or had to do to this point. But instead, you have Bruce Pearl coming out talking about how he feels good, he feels invigorated. I think there's just a general sense of excitement with what's next because it's so new. We'll talk about Todd Pettiford some more, obviously, in this, but he would be the only one coming back. It could be completely brand new everywhere else. And while that probably is a little bit frightening to a coach, a college basketball coach, knowing what he's up against, I did sense just a really good level of excitement about this roster. And I found that very interesting from Bruce Pearl at a time where this would be kind of a very different type of feel.
And I think if Bruce were in the spot that a couple of teams in the SEC were in last year, where they were starting over with a completely new team, but when you looked around the league, there were also some clear-cut superpowers. I think the idea that everyone in the league is sort of starting with a blank slate this year.
I'm glad you mentioned that because Bruce made a pretty funny comment. He was like, we're going to be the toughest team in the country to predict next season. He's like, there's 16 teams in our league. We're not going to be top 5 or top 6. And you kind of wanted to say, you wonder how aware he is of what everyone else is having. I'm sure they are, but a lot of teams are going to be in this situation. Maybe not to the absolute farthest extent like Auburn could be, like A&M's in that spot, but you look at a lot of teams We were talking about this, Henry Patton and I, on Monday on the way up. By the way, read Henry's stuff at the OA News. We were talking about the SEC, and it's like Missouri's bringing back a decent bit. Everybody else, like, how many teams in the SEC, Dan, are bringing their best player back? Like, if Ortega Owe comes back to Kentucky, that would probably be your pick.
Hubbard, if he came back,
if he comes back to Mississippi State,
if he came back to State, would be in that mix.
And Missouri's losing a couple guys. Like, Missouri's bringing back Mark Mitchell and a couple other guys, but like. Yeah, like most teams are hitting some sort of reset button. Auburn's maybe one of the biggest ones, but also Auburn's in a position now, like you were saying, look, they went all in on experience last year because they knew they needed to, and they knew probably that a lot of teams were doing the same thing. And now, this, if you're going to hit the reset button, this is the year to hit the reset button.
Yeah, this is a year too where, like you said, that you don't look around and see a ton of returning production. I think Bruce's comments were fair that a team totally starting anew like Auburn a year ago, it would have been tough to put that team in the top 5 or the top 6 of the SEC.
Case in point, Kentucky and Arkansas weren't.
Exactly. Kentucky and Arkansas starting over when you had teams like Auburn and Florida and Alabama and Tennessee coming back in last year's SEC. So this is it's a different league, and even though it's got to be difficult to bring in a brand new roster, and Bruce has never really tried that before at Auburn, the fact is there are a lot of teams in the SEC, a lot of coaches in the same boat as far as having to bring in a lot of new production to keep up with the rest of the conference.
How do you? I'm interested in your thoughts about this quote here, Dan. Bruce said, "I give John Cohen and his staff a lot of credit because they knew this was going to be a year where I was going to have to require more NIL. I don't mind telling you, last year our basketball team was about 8th in our league in NIL." And then later on he goes to say, "Having to replace 11 guys, we had to make a greater investment. And John Cohen and On to Victory and the donors were prepared and put us in a position where we could put a roster together." Auburn, middle of the pack in NIL last season, according to Bruce Pearl, wins the league outright, goes to the Final Four. But they knew they had to step up. And it's kind of been a theme that we've heard Bruce say this several times. This is probably the most detail he put into it so far this offseason, is that, we're about to get in this revenue sharing era and all that. But like for right now, to build this roster, it was still the NIL rules. It was still the wild, wild west of roster building. And that was gonna cause a lot, create a lot of opportunity to get some, need some cash. And it sounds like Auburn really stepped it up in that way. And it was very interesting to hear from Pearl because in the past he's kind of hinted at or kind of, pointed at like, oh, yeah, there's some schools in this league that have really jumped up in NIL. But to hear him say, no, this is where we were and we feel like we're in a better spot now, I thought that was really interesting. It makes sense you do that right after a Final Four year. Makes sense you do that right after or when you have to reset your roster. But it's still got to be done. It's still the money's still got to get in there.
Yeah, and without ever knowing, the answers to this sort of NIL thing and just sort of speculating, I would think that last year's SEC, like leaving Auburn aside for a second, like last year's SEC had multiple teams that saw themselves as national championship contenders, and those rosters ain't cheap. You had some teams that maybe believed it, but it fell apart, right? Like that Texas roster probably didn't come.
If Texas wanted to like run an offense, they probably would have been a pretty good team last year.
Sure, but you think about a couple of the flashiest, a couple of the blockbusters on that Texas roster.
Trey Johnson himself carries a pretty penny. I know Arthur Kaluma commanded a pretty good amount of NIL in the portal because there were several teams that were after him, including Auburn, and Texas was the one who ended up getting him.
There was a healthy market for Tremont Mark in the portal as well, as there usually is, right? He's done this a couple of times.
Tremont Mark knows how to work the market.
Sure, he knows what he knows who to call, and I would say along the same lines, you're not getting in the Jeremiah Fears business without contributing some serious money to NIL. So there were probably some eye-popping budgets around the conference last year.
I'm just sitting here thinking about how much South Carolina probably had to pay to bring CMB back.
Asa Newell. to beat Alabama out for Asa Newell at the University of Georgia, on top of Demery and keeping Blue Cane in the picture and things like that. So
and here we are a year later, they get Darian Reed, but they lose Demery, and and they don't have Newell anymore, and so it's just a lot is in flux. Bruce Pearl sounds really confident in his guys coming in now. He was saying, like, I don't know who works in ball screens. I don't know how we're going to defend. I think I got some guys who can shoot it, X, Y, and Z. But the bigger focus, Auburn is going to bring these guys in. Memorial Day weekend is when folks are getting onto campus and the summer work really starts. The big priority that Bruce Pearl has said over these next few months in this summer is you got to build a culture again. Like he was saying, it was a really good point that I hadn't really thought about yet. It's not like you could sit here and point. It's like you can't point to Dylan Cardwell or Denver Jones or somebody like that and say, do what that guy's doing. You can't do that in a landscape where there's nobody returning. Like, and even if there is a guy returning, it's just a Todd Pettiford, and that's just one guy who's only been in it for 1 year.
He's been ingratiating new players in with the old, right? Like, you think about the previous, like Bruce Pearl has gone out and made big changes to a roster from year to year, but there's usually been there's usually been some starter left over that you can mix in and
or at least
like
I think of like a Chris Moore, like a culture guy where you can just point to and say, follow that dude's direction. He's been here before and he knows what to do. Rebuilding that culture is going to be very interesting. However, he talked about one of the priorities he had in the portal with getting these guys is, okay, are they going to fit what we want to do? And it's like, we've got to teach them to do how we do things, right? How we practice, how we run defense, offense, all that, how we work. I mean, he talked about how important these breakfasts that they're going to have, these team breakfasts in the summer, how crucial those were in the last couple of seasons, especially this past season, to getting this team to be together. They're going to have to do that now with a whole new group of people. And they think through the recruiting process, they found guys that it's going to mesh with, like it's going to gel with that. They're going to fit with Auburn. Like Auburn, we were talking about this the other day. The fact that the best player in Auburn basketball history, or at least somebody you could say has a really good shot to be a best player in Auburn basketball history, was a 2-star recruit from Morehead State, says a lot. That Auburn just doesn't go star chasing and bag hunting, like with now they get some really good players, but it's about building a team and a culture and an identity. They're not trying to max out their salary cap. They're not just trying to get all these guys and, win the award for the flashiest transfer portal class or get all these 5 stars in through the high school ranks. So I think that's going to be the thing to keep an eye on with Auburn, and just kind of how they say they go about it over these next few months is like, can these guys mesh together? Because they can play ball. Like this crew can play ball. I think of the teams that have had to hit the big reset button in the transfer portal, at least in the SEC this year, I mean, Auburn's done about as good a work as you're going to find with anybody. They might not have the biggest and the best and the brightest transfer class on paper, but it's a lot of dudes that make sense with Bruce Pearl and Auburn basketball.
And the only umbrage I would take it is technically true that Broom was a 2-star from Morehead State, right? But it was like he'd been at coming out of high school. He'd been a 2.
Yes.
By the time he was leaving, even by the time he left Morehead State, he was you had a healthy market for Janai Broom. In
but people
2022.
didn't think he was National Player of the Year good.
People didn't know what they were. Yeah, people didn't quite know that. But I mean, when Auburn and Florida are after a big, like, he's probably look. Those are 2 coaching staffs that I trust to identify.
Really good at talent evaluation.
Yeah. I would say if somebody's in on if those 2 are in on somebody, it's worth a look. The position where, assuming Keyshawn Hall spends most of the time at the 4. The position
I tried to get Bruce to say it today, and I think it's just it's versatility.
And the position where I'm really curious to see like the evolution is the combination of guys at the 2 and the 3.
Yeah.
Excluding Keyshawn Hall from this. Like the Overton and Bashir and Freeman and the possibility of the freshmen, Magwood and Wells, like those 5
Walker.
Yeah, Magwood and Walker. Like those are, I mean, those are really like to me, and it's aside from Overton, it's not really guys that have played a ton of or any major conference D1 basketball.
No. And I thought it was interesting also that Bruce Pearl said, and we'll get to Tahad watch here in a little bit, our bi-weekly update. I thought it was interesting that he said if Tahad stayed at Auburn, they would probably use another roster spot on another wing. To me, that communicates, okay, they could reinforce the wing spot. And two, Keyshawn Hall makes a lot of sense at the 4. Now, he talked about Murphy playing the 4 and the 5 as well. But you're right, Dan. Like, I think there's a ton of potential. There's some athletes, right? Elijah Freeman's a fantastic athlete. Abdul Bashir can fill it up.
Bashir seems like the kind of junior college player that people safely project to get into a rotation in high major basketball.
Yeah, and it's tough.
It's tough. It's tough, but we've seen players make that jump and thrive. Auburn just had a guy. Obviously, it was a little different because Chad had played D1 basketball and then moved to the junior college level.
Right.
But he jumped up and started swimming immediately.
Yeah, and I think there's really good stories like that elsewhere. I think of Cedric Coward, the jump he's made, and obviously guy going through the NBA draft process as well. Went to at Duke right now. Like you can find that kind of talent anywhere. Elijah Freeman was a guy that you watch his film and you're like, that dude should not have been playing Division II basketball last year. Just the best athlete on the floor from the rip and was really, really good at a lot. And look, Auburn found that in Chaney Johnson. They found that value in Chad Baker-Mazara. They found it in other spots as well, but you're right. There's a ton of potential there, but it's like Kevin Overton's the guy, and I think that was why getting Kevin Overton was so big. I also think that was why Auburn was in the works of bringing Chad Baker-Mazara back, is to have that continuity there, because those are two positions where the 2 and the 3 where, resetting there is not the easiest thing in the world to do. I think there's going to be questions about how that crew defends. I think there's going to be questions about how the crew defends in general, because experience and retaining, retaining guys year over year, that's how you build a strong, consistent defense in college basketball. We've seen that with Bruce Pearl, and we've seen that at Auburn here recently.
The defense is probably one of the reasons why if we were putting together a starting 5 right now, I feel like we both would probably have Overton in there, even though like some of the – and it's not like the underlying – like the offensive numbers have promise too, but I think they're a big reason why you would expect him to –
well, he's done it at this level.
Yeah, and has a little bit of that Denver Jones go get the ball as a defender mentality. Like he would be a guy that I think and Todd's going to have to do some of that too, as if he returns.
If he comes back,
But I think they would feel comfortable sending Kevin over.
Bashir and Freeman like have the potential, the length and the athleticism of those two guys. Like you see the tools of a guy who could be of guys who could be really good defenders in time. It's just they haven't had to do this at this level. There's a big difference in the guys they had to guard at the D2 and JUCO and what they're going to run up against in the SEC. I did find it interesting, though, that Bruce Pearl was saying, hey, if Tahad comes back, we probably could use another wing. Makes sense. It also would make sense, especially if you have Hall at 3. Now, the other interesting thing, maybe the biggest interesting news part from the talk on Monday was Bruce Pearl coming right out and saying, we are close to signing an international player. Now, international players are having to go through different hoops now. There's a new FIBA rule where it's like basically like a letter of release, very similar to how guys move teams from club to club overseas. For college ball, it's kind of a way to protect some of these foreign clubs from having to lose. When they lose guys to college basketball, it kind of gives a different little different I said hoop to jump through. Yeah, it's just another thing they have to go through to make it more formalized and not just lose, like they feel like they're just losing guys there with no warning. This kind of gives it this notice kind of helps it out a little bit. But Bruce Pearl saying that they want to get an international guy, or they're close to getting an international guy. Got to dot all the I's, cross all the T's. There have been a couple names that have floated out there, been going on there. Justin Hokanson at On3, Auburn Live, was the first person I saw to report this, so I'm crediting him with it. But the one to look for is Filip Jovic from KK Mega Basket in Serbia. Why is KK Mega Basket in Serbia relevant? Well, Nikola Jokic played there, and pretty much every other Serbian that has played in the NBA in the last few years has come through that. Club, that pro setup over there.
How commonplace is, and I know there are some examples of it, but guys jumping from Euro club ball into college basketball and making something of an immediate impact versus it taking a little bit of time and maybe it being gradual. Because just I feel like I always associate
Florida's hit a couple of those guys.
That's true, and including Kondo coming from Australia, who is another one of those players that I feel like it's this is a little bit of a digression, but I think Tahad, LeBaron Philon, if he was interested in returning to college basketball, and Alex Condon are in a similar boat as far as what they would mean to their team if they came back. And I saw ESPN.com updating I think it was the post-combine mock draft. Those three go, I think, back to back in the second round in their projection, or right.
It's why they feel very similar.
Yeah, right next to each other in the second round, or early in the second round. But I think those are three. I know, and Philon has said he's not playing college basketball anymore. But like those feel like three guys that all have, like, it's a huge decision, not just for them, but for their college basketball programs and their coaches and the outlook they have next year if they decide to make that jump. But no, I've always associated European players more with, they're gonna jump to professional basketball. And for a long time there were those rules that kept guys who had been European pros from coming to play
because they had made money playing basketball. Now that's not an issue anymore in college.
Right. Now that doesn't take you off the board, and there are ways to sort of square that you've preserved your amateurism, even playing club ball internationally. I wonder if we'll see more international players making an impact in college basketball.
It's interesting. Jovic was linked to Wisconsin last month, and it felt like he was going to go there. That never materialized. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm a grand expert on his game and all that.
Can't wait for this film room.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to doing that if he ends up picking Auburn. But 12.5 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist and a half per game, 57.3% shooting from the field. He played in a fall showcase game against the G League, against some G Leaguers last year, 16-7 against. So you're talking about that kind of level of a player. Really known for his athleticism. You watch him on film, 6'9", good on his feet. He is very athletic. Like when you think of, and it's not just because of Big Jokic, but like I think there's also decades of this. When you think of the Eastern European basketball import, the big man that you bring in from over there, you don't think athlete. You don't think that's like a big thing right off the bat with him. This guy's very athletic. Downhill driver, can do a lot of different things.
My man Vlade Divac would have given you a triple-double with a lit cigarette hanging out of his mouth, all right? That's my guy.
Again, it's the Nikola Jokic, the best player in the world, looks like he's playing in flip-flops. Like it's some of that to it.
There's a smashed McDouble tweet.
Yes.
From that's the sense you get sometimes, yeah.
But he's got a really good burst. Driver, obviously when you're a European big man, you're used to playing 5 out. You're used to doing stuff like flex cutting.
You've speculated in the past. I mean, I remember like the offseason, like the first offseason with Janai, leading up to that, when did they go to, was that the Israel trip? That was the
year before.
Okay, but there had been some international trips mixed in,
yes,
along the way, and it was like you had wondered if Bruce might start looking to the international ranks to sort of supplement his roster, especially in the front court. And here we are a couple years later, and you're getting players that might be familiar with that 5-out style.
And Bruce Pearl and Mike Burgermaster deserves a lot of credit in this, putting a European flavor to their offense, the way they run their offense. And I think it makes a ton of sense for Auburn to eventually go out and get a European big to play in this system because, man, like, they're used to running that same kind of stuff. And it, again, on a team like this, it doesn't really matter if he's arriving late or he's one of the last ones because, look around, everything's new, as Pearl said on Monday. But, yeah, keep an eye on him. That seems to be the guy. There was also a French player named Desert, the last name.
Sweet.
Yeah, would have been it was another one that was linked to him. But there's been more steam, more reporting, more projection to Jovic to go to come to Auburn. So be very interesting. Auburn, by the way, not usually a place that has gone internationally to sign guys like directly from overseas in the past. I think Auburn's had guys who were international, but they played high school basketball in America and brought them over. If you think of pretty much any international Auburn basketball player over the years, that was kind of the path they took, right? Stretch Akimbola, Yohan Traore, going all the way back to Mamadou Njai, guys who played, they were international guys, but they played high school basketball before coming to Auburn in the United States.
Were the NCAA amateurism rules complicating things for a long time?
If you played professionally. Yeah. If you played professionally.
If you wanted to recruit someone, who hadn't gone to high school in the United States, right? Like often they're
it was tougher
through their club systems and through it wasn't obviously you had foreign players impacting college basketball.
It looks like the last player Auburn got directly from overseas was Jack Purchase, who played a year here in Australia and ended up going to Hawaii. It's just not a route that is very common. But apparently Auburn is, knocking down there. And it makes a ton of sense.
Chad's from the Dominican, but it's not really the same.
Chad Baker Mazar is another great example. Who went to high school in the United States.
And even junior college at Northwest Florida State.
We had speculated when Auburn said, hey, Bruce Pearl came out and it was that baseball game interview with Andy where he said, hey, we'd like to get another big man. Said okay, Auburn may, when James Scott ends up going to Ole Miss, it's like they might hang back, wait and see with these draft decisions what goes out. As we've talked about, there are more guys who play guard that are in the draft process and in the transfer portal who could pull out. PJ Haggerty, RJ Lewis, Boogie Flan, etc. Boogie Flan's already out. Compared to front court guys, not very many of those. So it does make sense Auburn going to the international ranks to try to pick up another player there in the front court. All right. Tahad Watch. Bruce Pearl saying...
Play the music.
Yeah, play the music. Bruce Pearl saying on Monday, kind of common sense here, he's looking for a first-round grade. And I thought it was interesting that Bruce said straight up, if he gets a first-round guarantee, he should go. Not only is
we'd wondered about that. About
yes.
To
hear them say straight up, hey, if he thinks he's going in the first round, if he's told he's going in the first round, he should go. Auburn does not need to get in the business of being a place where hey, if you come here, we're going to fight tooth and nail and try to discourage you from, if you're a first-round NBA draft pick, go for it. And I thought it was interesting. We've got the Final Four set in the NBA, and I'm not going to get too far into NBA talk, but the Final Four is set in the NBA. The starters on those teams, the average draft spot of those teams, I saw this on the way coming in to record the podcast, it was 19th in the draft. So more and more teams feel like they're getting value in the mid to late first round, even the second round, those kind of guys. So again, if you feel like there's a team that's got a spot for you and a place for you and a plan for you in the back of that first round, go ahead and go. Auburn's not going to fight you on that. They'd love to have you back, but Tahad has said it from the beginning. There's more transparency, I think, on both sides now after this combine process. And from what Pearl said, yes, if he feels like he's going to go in the first round, if he's told he's going to go in the first round, that's probably going to be it. The problem, though, Dan, is no one knows if he's going in the first round. Like you said, ESPN's updated their boards. They still have him in the second round. A lot of other people, opinions are still very divided on where he is. He is a borderline prospect. That's why it feels like it's getting closer to 50-50.
We've speculated on whether or not Bruce would have an appetite for trying to talk a guy who got a late first-round grade into coming back to college basketball for another year and risking that to improve his status and maybe play his way into the lottery. Just based on the way Bruce has talked, and this is obviously it's an evolving situation. I always got the sense Bruce would probably not want to be in the business of trying to get guys who are getting.
You don't want to have that rep.
Yeah, I mean, and it could
it could backfire you in future recruiting battles too.
And I'm not and that's not to say like if Tahad was getting a late first round grade from some places, which doesn't necessarily mean you're going in the first round, because I'd say there's probably more than 30 people.
He's going to need NBA teams to confidently tell him he's going to go in the first round. And if he declares, or if he stays in the draft, and he's got about a week to do that, Pearl said a week, maybe 8 or 9 days. That's literally the deadline in 9 days.
I wonder if it's going to take like a promise from a team. Like, hey, if you're on the board.
I think it would take a promise from a team, maybe multiple teams.
And maybe multiples, where it's like if you're on the board at 28 or 29 or 30, we're going to go get you.
Because what happens if the board changes, and we talked about this recently, like what happens if some of those point guards slip? And it's like, oh, we liked you at this spot, but we didn't think, player X here was going to be available there.
We were going to take you at 28, but we got our guy earlier, right? And so now we don't need to go move back into the first round and go get you at 28.
And it's going to be what he feels comfortable with. And, Pearl said
it's poker season too. Like a lot of these teams, probably don't want it out there, as far as exactly what they're planning to do and exactly what they're thinking and the promises they're making behind closed doors.
I thought it was telling, and again, tweets are tweets. Social media is social media. I thought it has been telling.
It's real. It's
yes. It's the most important. It's the most important thing that's happening.
It's binding. It's the only thing that's real.
I thought it was very telling though that during the combine last week, Bruce Pearl, his assistants and all that, Auburn was playing up the fact like, oh, Tahad was shining, and like not saying like, oh, don't pay attention to him. We need him back. It's like, no, man. Like they want to be a place where it's like, we can develop you there. And if it is you're one and done, that's tough for our team next season. But it's a good, I asked Bruce about having 4 guys in the draft process in the combine, all the stuff going on in Chicago. The first thing he says is, well, I thought Denver Jones should have been there as well. He's like, but it's validating of the talent you've brought in and been able to develop. And like, that's a good sign. That's a really, really good sign for him. So yeah, in regards to Tahad Watch, Pearl said if he comes back, he will have a bigger role, an expanded role, a role that he is excited about, and a role that Auburn fans are going to be excited about because it's probably going to be heavy minutes and the starter, be the leader of the team. He also said if Auburn does not bring him back, if he stays in the draft, there are several guys who are keeping an eye on it. They have been in contact with players waiting to see what Tahad's decision is. I did find it interesting also, Dan, that Bruce Pearl said if Tahad Pettiford comes back, they're going to use that spot on a wing, which makes you think Caden Magwood season at backup point guard next year, which makes sense.
Looking at the draft and sort of how, the reason why, it benefits Bruce if Tahad goes and becomes a hot property in the NBA and a recognizable name in professional basketball. Like it's still going to,
it hurts next season's team obviously, but it doesn't hurt Auburn basketball at all.
No, I don't think so. And so I think there's
also real quick, timing's important here. Like I know if say Bruce Pearl doesn't get Tahad Pettiford back and Auburn's got to scramble a little bit and go after somebody, they have the backup plans, the contingency plans. We'll see. It'll be hard, because you're probably not getting a guy quite like Tahad, you would think. But, like, the other thing is, what could they have done? You couldn't go get a plan B right now because you need to keep that money and you need to keep those roster spots open.
You can make it clear that Tahad's not welcome back and go pursue a plan B if you think if you think that's like the best thing for you. But
so this wait out, feel it out process, if Tahad Pettiford ends up staying in the draft, Auburn's done all they can do. And the fact that they have talked to some people in case and made it clear that's like, hey, if Tahad stays in the draft, you're next. Like you're on our list. That's probably the best way to go about it. I don't know what they could have done differently.
It would be great if the calendar was a little bit different as far as the NBA draft and things, so that these decisions were, had to be made a little bit earlier. But the fact is, there's no real onus on the NBA or the
NBA's
draft.
Not going to change for that.
They don't need to change that. And actually giving kids giving kids time to make the decisions and
letting them pull out if they need to,
and letting them get as much information as possible about the decision they're going to make is probably for the best. So it is a nervous, wait until Tahad has to make his decision one way or the other. But no, I don't know if there's anything Auburn could have done differently, or if there's anything the coaches could have done differently, or should have done differently. Like, I don't know if there's a strategic move with upside that was at their disposal here.
I've said 60-40. I'm still around that. It does feel like it's closer to 50-50 than maybe some people would have expected to begin with. Also, like, Todd Bedford's a really good basketball player, and he's done really well.
I saw, and this, I believe, the same ESPN.com mock draft that had Philon and Tahad and Kondo going right next to each other. Walter Clayton Jr. is working his way into some first rounds in some folks' mind, and that's a really interesting draft prospect, because I feel like a lot of the measurables and a lot of the a lot of your combine numbers are probably going to tell you that he's not a spectacular NBA prospect.
But the film's going to say that dude can hoop. But boy good.
Yeah. The film's going to say ball goes in basket.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
and it doesn't matter how he's getting defended.
And that's just and it's still that's people were, and again, it's one example, but like, people weren't necessarily sold on Jalen Brunson as a prospect,
not at all.
But the ball went in the basket, right, with Jalen Brunson, and right now you're seeing he's the best player on a team that might go to the finals.
Yeah.
So and might do more than that. So it's like, and I think that would be for folks wondering, like, yes, a lot of Tahad's physical measurable, like that, it's not going to change.
No. He will always be 6 foot 6'1",
and he could even, I guess Walter Clayton would be the example of, like, he could even have a brilliant season.
He could be a first team All-American on a national champion, and
folks might still disregard. But it's like, it's
yeah. No, I agree. Interesting point from Bruce Pearl that I thought stood out to me on Monday. He said, we might have to play faster this year. We're not going to be as big, and you don't have the Jedi Broom dump it down and make something happen, either score, kick out and all that. Talked about potentially being a little more run and gun than they have been in the past. Makes sense. Dan, this is one of the things we've talked about with this rebuilding process. Even the bigs, a lot of these guys that Auburn has picked up, they make a ton of sense as guys who run and move well.
And last year's team made a ton of sense as a half-court team.
Yes.
Right, when you think about the personnel that you had last year, especially
to the point that when they were not a good, transition fast break team, it didn't really matter because they were the most efficient team in the country on offense and a lot of times on defense too in the half court.
Without a ton of transition points either way, right? Yep. Like they could still be at
times they were not good at all in transition, and it did not really matter that much.
And you also had a team last year where there were multiple guys with 150. College basketball games to their
part of getting these younger athletes and these guys that don't have as much wear and tear on them is like, turn them loose. And I think even a guy like, this is why if Tahad Pettiford comes back, his combo with Keyshawn Murphy is fascinating to me, because I think that is a perfect 1-5 roll man, half roll pick and like there's a lot that fits there. And again, with Tahad Pettiford, when Auburn was at its best in transition last season, it was usually Tahad Pettiford getting the ball. I think back to that Houston game. Get the ball, go run down the floor before they can set up their defense. A lot has been built to that. Now, I don't know who Auburn has reached out to in the event of a Tahad Pettiford going in the NBA draft. I would not be surprised, though, if Tahad stays in the NBA draft. The replacements or the guys they go after are get down the floor quick, kind of those speedier point guards, because they have built a roster, in my opinion, around that type of talent. Not the dribble it up, work the clock, work it in that. They're going to run half court stuff. They're going to run their stuff, but like this team's going to get out and go, I think, a lot more.
The portal's closed, right? So, like, when you talk about college basketball, like the suspects that Auburn could pursue to replace Tahad are guys that, their names are out there, and you would figure Auburn would be shopping at the top of the market, and if that's
and there's a few guards that are still in the draft process that may or may not be in the portal.
I made this point on the drive.
Afterwards.
I made this point on the drive earlier. You get the sense that, and this is why there's an advantage in Auburn that Tahad is not in the portal. And if he decides to come back, Auburn knows.
I think that says a lot, though.
They've got their guy. There are going to, like, it's a game of musical chairs. There are more schools than there are these kind of players.
Yes.
And what you want is you want to be able to find your seat. And if Auburn would love to know they've got their guy in Todd Pettiford. If not, they're going to be in the market just like several other schools. They're going to be in the market for one of the few guys that
high impact NBA draft caliber type of guards
that project as that kind of player.
All right, no football news to talk about. Breakdown report. Auburn had a busy recruiting weekend with visitors. We're hoping to have our buddy Christian Clemente on some point here in the next month or so to talk about Auburn football's recruiting. But we did want to go back to a segment that we debuted in the last episode. So if you're a subscriber and you listen to the premium podcast, you heard Dan unveil his top 4. Are you sold on the Observe 4?
I don't know. The Quadserver?
The Quadserver. Yeah, you're coming up with new ones every time. So anyway, it was a segment where very off season where Dan had some top 4s he wanted us to do, and we did. Last one was Auburn running back since 2005, our favorite Auburn running back since 2005.
Quabserver.
We did former Bruce Pearl players to add on this year's roster, and then we also did
Spielberg.
Yeah,
our four Spielbergs.
So I asked folks to if they liked the segment and wanted to shout them out, and even shout out some of their own ideas here. I did want to say. Gonna run through some of the list.
Yeah, we've got some feedback, right?
We got some feedback.
We'll happily.
Alan pointed out one we didn't talk about.
Which one? Spielberg?
Tristan Davis.
Oh, okay.
In the running backs.
Yeah,
Tristan Davis.
I associate and you're right. 05 is
it's the cutoff point.
You're right.
He said the 05 UK game, kick returns, and the PS2 era college football games had me make this pick. This man was a weapon that was not used well enough.
Yeah, I think more of his special teams contributions than what Tristan gave the team at running back. But he was always a guy like folks and bounced around from offense to defense too. As
Scott shouted out Sean Shivers.
Another
who
one.
I don't know if we mentioned. By the way, congratulations to Sean Shivers. He's now a GA at Eastern Michigan, his first college job.
Very cool to see.
Very cool to see Worm make that move. Walt pointed out Peyton Barber. That is a if you want to go underrated or guys like who were just beloved for like what they were able to do. Yeah, I like that. I like that pick a lot. Some other ones. Scott also pointed out the Spielberg list. Duel.
Yeah, I love a dual reference. I couldn't put in my top 4. I don't know if we mentioned Close Encounters in our Spielberg talk either. Which Close Encounters is. I don't love the ending as much as other folks. But I feel like the movie is. I think the first 2 hours or so is better than the final 30 minutes. But Close Encounters is just it's a magnificent piece of work.
So. We also had people come up with people suggest their own ideas. And we might not do these right now, but there's some ones to get the ball rolling. And if you have ideas for these top 4s to help us get through the offseason, throw them out to us. We had Vince say, Auburn is sometimes notoriously magic and tragic. Top 4 Auburn magic moments and top 4 Auburn tragic moments. That's something to keep an eye on. We'll think on those for sure. And then I did this one. I need you to answer this one. Okay.
I'm excited.
And this will be, we'll get back to the sports. I need you to answer this one because I have done this one recently in a mailbag, and I want your answers for it. Tyler emailed in and said, as a category, he wants to hear your 4 favorite Auburn Opelika restaurants that are no longer with us.
Oh, wow.
I did this one recently,
Dearly
and I think I did
departed.
5. I think I did 5.
Can Finley's just be my
Yeah, I think Finley's.
all 4?
By the way, Tyler's picks were Whispering Ghost and Opelika, the Barbecue House, Tenda Chick, and then he said, I don't remember the name, but there was a gentleman that ran a place in the gas station down Wire at the intersection of Webster that had the best catfish in town.
Okay.
I was not aware of that
Catfish
place.
Gentleman?
Yeah, the Catfish Man.
Catfish Gentleman?
All right, so Finley's is on your list, obviously.
Yeah, sure. And
I'm going to pull out my list while you're doing this.
I only went to Creole a couple of times. I can't pretend. Yeah, I can't pretend like I was a regular or something like that. But that place was the goods too. Shout out to Touchdowns. How about that? I don't know if you were a Touchdowns guy, Justin.
I don't know.
Oh, Touchdowns.
So I did this in the mailbag a few weeks ago, and then I asked people to give theirs. So we've done this a lot recently. So you did. All right, so you're on Finley's and Touchdowns.
I'll have Creole in mind just to play it safe. Roosters had some pretty good chicken. That might be a little before your time on West Mag.
I don't know that one. Yeah,
Rooster. I believe Roosters is where the Chipotle used to be, or I believe Roosters is on the. It's in that vicinity.
Okay.
Like where not where the Chipotle is, I should say, is where Roosters used to be. But there's I think that's if I think of a better one, I will let you know. But that's on my list right now.
I had Tenda Chick, Finley's, Creole Shack, and Hibachi Express.
Yeah, Hibachi Express is good. Although I don't.
There's one in Columbus still.
I don't find myself missing Hibachi Express because there are so many and growing. There are so many options for
boy, are they growing
for that.
Yeah, it's a good list. All right, so top 4s. Give me a football top 4 to carry our football discussion on this podcast.
All right, Justin. Since we did running backs last time, maybe it's like. We'll go into the secondary. Like give me your last. So the
since the 04
yeah,
team,
and we're limiting we're starting with 05. So the last 20 years of Auburn football. Give me your quad serve or give me your letterbox style 4 favorite defensive backs that have played for the team.
Okay. I'm gonna go with guys.
Is there an immediate? Is there a guy that immediately comes to mind? There be on your list?
Are a couple that immediately come to mind. I'm going to go with guys that I covered that I really enjoyed watching play, talk to, all that. I like the combo there. So this group will be since 2013.
Okay. I'll rep a couple of Tuberville.
Yes, that would be good.
Chiswick guys.
Because there's some good ones in that. There's some good ones in that list for sure. The first name that immediately popped into my mind when you said this, I got to go Roger McCreary.
Yeah,
I loved Roger McCreary. And the big thing with Roger was I loved his story. This was a guy that was going to go play at South Alabama, and a spot opens, and Auburn.
Like the Jared Harper story.
Yeah,
it's like
Kevin Steele had a good read on him and thought that this guy had the potential to be an SEC corner. He was statistically one of the best corners Auburn's been able to put out. I mean, his numbers were fantastic. He was a guy, and I loved Roger in the fact that like on the field, he was a really like high level competitor and all that. But he didn't have that like corner, like when you think of like all-star corners, you think about like trash talkers, big personalities, and all that. Roger didn't really have that. He wasn't that kind of guy. Now,
he wasn't wired like D'Angelo Hall. Is that?
Yeah,
is that
no,
sort of
yeah. He's not. He wasn't that kind of guy. He wasn't a Jalen Ramsey type of corner. But being an in-state kid, being a great like example of recruiting rankings are great, and in the macro they mean a lot, but in the micro, I mean, this dude was off the board like in the thousands when it came to recruiting, like outside the top 100, maybe he might have been outside the top 100 in the state or something like that when he was coming out of high school. The fact that he turned into an All-American type of corner, an All-SEC type of corner, and a really good draft pick, he stands out to me a lot. I'll give you another one. Similar story. Great dude. I'm glad he is still. I'm really happy. I'm really happy every time I see him pop up because I'm glad he's still playing in the NFL and doing his thing. Daniel Thomas, similar story. This was a guy, Montgomery, Auburn signing day. They had a guy that had a decision go the other way. He was the one they picked up on the offer. they go with him. Daniel Thomas, man, like as a player, was very good. Like as steady as they come at the safety spot. Did a variety of things. One of the nicest guys I've probably ever covered. Just a great, genuine dude. I'm so happy that he continues to play in the NFL and get his opportunities. I really, really like Daniel Thomas a lot. And he'll always stick out to me for that. Let's see. Going on from there, I will pick.
Do you want me to jump in while you're thinking about some of your?
Yeah, you
go
in.
All right. So a couple of the guys, especially if I'm shooting for the era before where you're starting here, couple of the guys that come to mind immediately. Gerard Powers absolutely earns his spot on my list.
Like
big Gerard guy. Tell you what, we talked a lot about Kenny Irons in the last edition of this game. His brother David was a phenomenal corner in 2005 and 2006 for this team. David tore his ACL before the 04 season, or he would have been out there in 04. But David was an excellent defender. David gets the Seals and Iron Bowl with an interception in his Auburn career. Zach Etheridge was outstanding. I always had a soft spot for Darren Bates as a big time hitter. And a guy who, a couple of these guys are now, I mean, Zach Etheridge, obviously, it's well documented. He's coaching down in Miami, was on the Auburn staff recently. Nico Thorpe has been a coach in the NFL for a couple of years. Nico had a longer NFL career than I think some people might imagine. I was always a big believer in Nico Thorpe. Loved the physical tools from the first time I saw that guy as a corner. And I would I think Nico belongs out there in the mix. Aaron Savage has been a good.
How many are you at now?
Yeah, well, I haven't narrowed this quite.
Okay.
Yeah,
you're spitballing.
Yeah, I'm thinking that like I would certainly want Gerard, David, Nico on my list for sure. And Zach Etheridge, always a favorite of mine. So I might knock those four onto my list. Easy to, you know what? And also I feel like some folks might want Chris Davis mentioned as a possible.
It's a good one to have. It's a good one to have for sure. Chris Davis makes a ton of sense there. Josh Holsey. Really like Josh Holsey. That was a guy who moved around, saw a lot in his career, had injuries like that. That another guy that kind of like my other picks there, just sentimental picks of enjoyed covering those guys. But like when they were at the top, when he was at the top of his game, it was really, really good. And I don't know, Josh Holsey just always stood out to me as a guy that just did what the coaching staff wanted him to do, and he picked up a number of roles and played them really, really well. I've always want to say shout out to Holsey for that.
I'm a little embarrassed to realize I did not know how long Darren Bates and Nico Thorpe had been with their respective NFL organizations as coaches. Those two guys are doing great in the pros.
Can I give you one more fairly recent one that I think is a bit of a wild card here? Jamian Sherwood. Loved watching Jamian Sherwood play. There were a couple of games early in his career at Auburn where you watch him, he's like, this dude's everywhere. He's making plays left and right. I like the fact that he's had to move to linebacker in the NFL and made it work. Just a big, like really good athlete that made his presence felt early in his career and just, I mean, was a real big time playmaker. And not necessarily the guy you would think of early on as like, oh, this was a real standout player, but check the numbers, check the stats, check his production at Auburn. He was great, and I'm glad he's been able to stick around in the league. That's
a position too. I mean, I think it's it would feel like cheating to pick any of the guys on the current team, but
Sure.
but you look and there's a lot to like, between some of the returning players and some of the newly arrived younger players that were.
Crawford's got the juice.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kayan Lee's been talked about as an NFL player since he arrived. That's the thing. Hugh Freeze's been talking.
And I also say this, selfishly, personally, hope he has a great season coming back. Champ Anthony we could be doing this list 5 years from now. I might say Champ Anthony.
Big Champ Anthony fan.
Another great dude to talk to, and one of those players that's easy to root for. I think even in this, even in this industry, I think I would be remiss if, again, not in my top 4, but Noah Igbenogany needs to be mentioned.
Yeah.
A great story there. One of my favorite stories I ever wrote was talking to his dad and his high school coaches about kind of his transition, how wild that story was for him. And then, Dan, 2 more. Carlton Davis. I'll get 3 more. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean as a combo. Like that like they almost feel like a package deal. Just the amount of elite cornerback play Auburn got from those 2 guys. Just big corners that could lock you down.
Yeah, Jamel was always because sometimes you think of corners as being sinewy and lean. You know what I mean? And like Jamel was a solid looking physical player.
Jamel was a safety that could move like a corner.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, and then I would be remiss if Smoke Monday isn't mentioned here.
Correct.
Yep. You cannot deny that dude was not fun to watch. I mean, just a guy that, like, from the beginning of his career, you knew exactly what that dude was doing. He was not going to hide who he was and what kind of player he was, and lived up to it the whole way. Like that he had kind of, I'll say this, he had some like basketball player vibes to him, where it's just that person, you were talking about personality shining, and like how Roger wasn't one of those guys with the big personality showing through. Smoke was definitely one of those.
There's an edge needed at that position, and I think Smoke Monday really helped. Even as some of the bigger hits from safeties have been legislated out of football over the last 20 years, probably for good reasons.
The spiritual successor to Junior Rose Green was Smoke.
A lot, and that was passed down from player to player, and I think Darren Bates at one point wore that crown for Auburn, and I think Smoke Monday certainly had his claim to it.
So again, my list, I had McCreary, Thomas, Sherwood, and Holsey. Just guys personally I loved watching and covering. I mentioned that one more very recent one I just want to throw as an honorable mention while we were shouting out guys. Jalen Simpson. Jalen Simpson was a great one. A very fun dude to talk to and watch play.
So I would have, and cutting someone's going to be tough, but like I would, and it might, okay, so David Irons, give me Irons, Gerard, Zach Etheridge, and I'll take, because I feel like and you know what, the Zach Etheridge thing, there's a lot of Darren Bates in that Zach Etheridge choice, but I'm picking one safety, and then I'll take Nico Thorpe as the other one.
I like how you spent. All right, let's use this talking DBs to kind of segue a little bit. This crop right now in the secondary, you talked about the excitement level in that secondary. Even though Auburn lost some guys in the portal, they added some back. Been able to reload through when you think of the group of 5 pickups they were able to make, the freshmen that people are really, really excited about. I'm fascinated by the secondary in 2025. I felt like in some areas Auburn was ahead of the curve, ahead of schedule when it comes to what DJ Durkin's defenses usually do. The big issue of the 3rd and 10, the 3rd and long, give it up. I wonder how much the experience having Kayan Lee with another year, Jay Crawford with another year, Caleb Harris with another year.
Champ Anthony. Having Champ Anthony.
A healthy Champ Anthony.
And then having the fact that he's been in the offseason for another year.
And I like this group coming up. Blake Woodby, New Boy Fagans, Eric Winters, Donovan Starr. All those guys got really rave reviews in spring. And it's spring ball, it takes a lot to put that into motion. But even in the dark times, in the leaner times, and again, Auburn's still trying to break out of that in terms on their field, but in the darker and leaner recruiting times for Auburn football, you felt like the secondary, over a course of several coaches, had done a really good job of stockpile. Like the secondary has been a model of this is what you need to do roster wide. You need to recruit at a high level, retain these guys, and continue to add. Fill in where you need to in the transfer portal, but have those guys push and stack on each other. I think the secondary is the best example of that. They lost some of that depth. They were able to reload it a little bit more in this portal class. It's just that's a really good position group to be in, and I think people should be excited about that team. I have my doubts about linebacker. It'll be interesting to see what they do at defensive tackle. There's some issues in the front seven. They're gonna have to work themselves out. Question marks. You feel a lot better about that secondary.
Yeah, I got the sense Auburn had a really solid nucleus coming back, right? Like they already had some guys who got a taste of college football and looked like they were going to be able to build on that first taste, whether it was Kay, and obviously he's a third-year player, right? But guys like Jay Crawford and Champ and KLF and the young safeties, right? Those guys. I mean, it was almost as though Auburn had a group they could look at as starters in the. I mean, Sylvester and Caleb look like they could be. I mean, and then to be able to add an entirely new group of young players that can mix in, because Auburn's got 4 or 5 true freshmen that look like they belong on the field too.
Yeah.
As you know, that's a,
and you pick up a couple of group of 5 transfers at corner that you really like. You pick up another safety in Tate Seymour that gives you some experience in the back end. Like there's a lot to like about this secondary. And I think some of the issues last season where you had like the third and long breakdowns, maybe not forcing as many interceptions as you want to or pass breakups as you want to, just some of that stuff with the pass defense. The fact that they threw out so much youth out there.
You were going to plan B and plan C last year early, I think in part because Keontae Scott didn't have the season they were intending from both a production standpoint and a health standpoint, right? Yeah. So it was like suddenly
the champ injury changed a lot as well.
And I mean, to listen to them last offseason, and again, not blaming anyone, but like to listen to the coaching staff last offseason, it felt like they had a lot riding on Keontae to sort of anchor that defense as the. I mean, he was going to be the outside. He was going to move to outside corner,
yes,
and be the outside corner for most of the time. Then they try to move him back in. Like the fact that it didn't really work with an upperclassman they had really high hopes for. Suddenly you're going to younger players that looked like they were depth going into the season, and those guys had to get out there and get a taste of action extremely early in their careers.
And there were growing pains, but I think on the whole it was more good than bad. I think from that young secondary last season.
Right, and because those young guys got that action, they're more ready. Just like Kay and Lee last season, it wasn't his first taste of college football because he'd played a lot as a freshman. A lot of these guys, the players that are entering their second year now, the fact that they got on the field last year, as difficult as it probably was in the moment for those coaches to send them out there, the fact that they played is going to speed up their development and make them like they should be better off this year because of the action they saw last year on the field.
You got a off the wall top 5 to wrap or top 4 to wrap us off with.
I kind of want to. I kind of if I hold on. You want to?
No, yeah, you can leave it.
You want to leave that? All right, I was about to click. All right. So I was gonna say let's call MK and get her 4 Disneys, but. Or you can report back at some point.
She'll have takes at some point.
You know what I watched?
Hers would be her top 4 musicals right now. For sure.
So what I'd be curious about with MK's Disney picks would be, do you go like how much is she going way back, right? Like is she going to have
not a ton.
A Snow White or a Cinderella or a Sleeping Beauty?
She may have one of those.
Like one of the classic. I mean, I watched.
I bet I could pick her top.
I've watched the original Cinderella in the last month or so, and I mean, that thing. It is gorgeous. Like it's really well made. There's not as many songs as I thought. For some reason, I thought it was like one of these more modern ones, like loaded with musicals. But it's really loaded with music. I did
Disney songs recently, but yeah. What you got for me?
Let's just do the top 4 Braves. Like let's. I
mean, are you gonna have 4 Braves?
I gotta have 4 Braves. Yeah, okay. I was at the game where Fulton County Stadium caught fire. You're
at the press box game?
I was at Fred McGriff's first game as a Brave, my friend. I was there.
I was going to ask you for your top 4 Dodgers if you were going to, because we had talked.
I want to get your top 4 Dodgers later too. We can do that. But I know
Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, give me some. No, so
it'll just all be playing. Freddie Freeman.
No, but my favorite Braves would probably dip back into the 90s.
Yeah.
More. Well, we'll see. Yeah, but
see.
no, I'll play along. Yeah.
Okay, so top 4 Braves of all time. Well, you've decided that this is going to be the list. I told you, send in your comments and your feedback and all that with this segment. We hope this will be a fun one thing we can do throughout the offseason, just doing a few of these every episode. I really want to know your answers to this. Like, people send in the other ones, and I love them, and that's great. I appreciate it. If you're a Braves fan, I really want to hear this one because we could go deep. I know we've got some Braves fans who are around my age who listen to this podcast. I know we've got some Braves fans who are, significantly older
between
than
8
me.
and 80.
Yeah, we've got so many here. All right, here we go. Favorite Braves players of all time.
Is there someone who absolutely has to make your list?
There's 2.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry. There are 2. There are 2 that absolutely have to make my list, and I'm going to lead with these 2. My favorite Braves player growing up and will remain probably my favorite Braves player who isn't currently on the team right now is Chipper Jones. I was a big Chipper Jones guy. I will tell you this. Growing up, me and my brother was a huge Andre Jones fan, and I was a Chipper Jones fan. We thought it was cool. It was like we were the Jones brothers, but we were not brothers. Well, we were actually brothers. They weren't. Loved Chipper Jones. I remember it's like MLB 2000 or MLB 99. Chipper was on the cover, and that was one of the first baseball video games I owned, and I was so happy because it was Chipper, and I played the heck out of that game. Chipper is great. I have a couple of Chipper autographs in my baseball card collection that are like the prize. Like they're up there with the best stuff I have. Is the Chipper stuff. Love him. The fact that he did something like maybe the best switch hitter of all time, like hearing him talk about the art of hitting is to this day is incredible. And was glad that he was a Brave lifer because you hope that all your favorites get to do that forever, and that doesn't always work out. But the fact that it worked out for him always was great. And so Chipper's number 1 on my list. Number 2 on my list, and the other one I would put right up there, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it, Ronald Acuna Jr., the man that got me really back into being a diehard Braves fan. I had, team wasn't as good. I didn't keep up with them as much. A little bit of a fair weather in that sense. Didn't really watch a lot of baseball. When Acuna came up and watching Acuna play his rookie year, it was like that dude got me back into being a hardcore Braves fan, like watching as many games as I can, to the fact now that I'm a season ticket holder and tweeting about them constantly. It's a big hobby of mine. Watching the Braves is a huge hobby of mine. Ronald Acuna is a big reason for that, and I'm glad we're talking about him because there's a shot he comes back this weekend.
Yeah.
And I have been really anticipating that. I love Ronnie. I love the way he plays the game. I love how he's just this freak of nature type of athlete and has fun. Just you can tell he really just loves playing baseball and having fun with it, and that's the type of player I enjoy watching the most. When guys are like having a blast out there and doing things their own way in their own style, it's like when we were talking about the defensive backs. Like I love players like that. So Ronnie would be number 2 on my list. 1A, 1B, whatever. Those are 2, Dan, unquestionable. Have to have them in my list for sure.
See, and if I'm picking like an all-timer Brave who's got to be on mine, it's Maddox. So
also played for the Dodgers.
Yeah, who also happen to be So Maddox and Freeman are going to be on my list, and it just so happens.
I love Maddox though, man.
Yeah,
and
me too.
And just a guy that would not exist now as a baseball player. The fact that he was like did not throw hard, but he just knew exactly where to throw. I mean, every time.
Kershaw's trying.
But Kershaw wasn't always like
that.
No,
he was not always like that.
Imagine if young Kershaw was like just popping the leather in the high 80s, just not doing anything.
Yeah, it's so cerebral and it's so just absolutely maximizing your abilities and playing baseball in a different way than certainly is played now by most pitchers. But even then, right? Like I mean, there were still guys who were relying on velocity and it's just I think Greg Maddux rules, man. I mean, the more you learn about Greg Maddux, the cooler he becomes. And happy that he's on my on my list.
Yeah, and you had would Freddie be on your list as well?
And even before the home run in the World Series last year, Freddie had endeared himself to me, and that was a guy. I mean, I remember watching a lot of that first season with Hayward and Freddie, like when they were rookies for the Braves, and just being really impressed by in a time when, I mean, that division run was coming to an end, or it had ended, and you wondered like what the next decade held for the Braves, as some of those iconic parts of the 90s and 2000s teams were getting older and starting to retire, like Chipper. But no, Freddie Freeman, and no matter what he accomplishes as a Dodger, like I recognize like the Braves are such a huge part of his career. That's probably the hat he wears in the Hall of Fame. But just one of my,
if not, I'm going to be very sad.
One of my favorite players, and happy I get to cheer for him as a Dodger. But got to recognize that a lot of the reason that he's one of my favorite players comes from what he did as a Brave.
I want, before I get my last two on the list, I do want to say that if
are my picks all going to be guys who also played for the Dodgers,
that would be very fitting for you, Dan. I would say this with
okay, I got one. Yeah.
I have a special honorable mention here. I am not old enough to have watched Hank Aaron play, but the fact that one of the greatest players who ever lived was an Atlanta Brave for the majority of his career is awesome to me.
Do people know about the parking lot? Like, is that so? The
like where the home run ball
yes,
was? Yes,
it's across the street from the new Georgia State basketball arena.
Mm-hmm.
The parking lot at the former location of Fulton County Stadium, where they've got the exact spot where Aaron's home run landed. The record breaking home run. And next time you're in Atlanta, go check that out, because it's cool. They're keeping that important piece of sports history alive.
Yeah, that is awesome. All right,
I'll take Fred McGriff.
Yeah, McGriff. Yeah,
I'll take Freddie. I I was there. My first ever Major League Baseball game was that July night. And it was a memorable thing for a lot of reasons, but especially
for those who don't know what happened that night.
Yeah, so we were we were in Atlanta for a couple of days. My family and I think we were going to Six Flags too, and just taking in the sights. And we were going to go to the Braves game that night, and we get there, and there's a big crowd outside. This is before the internet, so you could not have just checked on your phone and found this news out. We arrived at the game and found out that it was going to be delayed because the heating apparatus had caught fire in the press box, and it ignited a pretty serious looking blaze, right? When you look at some of those pictures from inside. And it was one thing I remember about it was and it wasn't just the weather. I mean, granted, it was July in Atlanta, but it was so hot outside. It was the heat from that fire had amplified things around the stadium. And it was just it was a grind, and folks were ready for that game. I think folks were ready for the gates to open so they could go start buying Coca-Cola and beer, because the heat had just really cranked things up. And it was a blast. Got to admit that we were all tired, and we left in like the seventh inning and missed missed a Braves comeback victory. But an important. We knew it was going to be cool anyway, because the McGriff news had broken, and it was his first game. But then for it to become even more historic than that, because the stadium almost burned to the ground, made it even more memorable.
Javi Lopez,
good one.
Javi Lopez is my pick. The fact that like for my early childhood,
huge contract year.
Yeah.
For the Braves. You think about that one of the all-time great contract years, Rendonian contract year for my man.
Just my
Adrian Beltre-esque.
My early childhood, the Braves had an all-star caliber catcher back there, just constantly. It was really, really cool.
Tell you a guy I loved, Gary Sheffield.
Only a couple years. Only a couple years,
but some good ones. Some good years in Atlanta. played a little bit for the LA Dodgers as well. But yeah, Chef.
Can I give you one more off the wall one? And I realize I'm not having any pitchers on there. Maddox is a great pick. Maddox is probably my favorite pitcher of like the classic group. I think Smoltz as a color commentator soured me a little bit more on him. I loved him growing up, but
Kenley,
Kenley Jansen. I will. I'll say, can I give you an off the wall one? And this
is
one,
a pitcher?
No, this is this position player.
Did you see the Furcal news?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so
he threw a rock. Apparently.
Yeah, and people are.
Can you imagine getting hit with a rock by Rafael Furcal?
That guy, yeah, no joke. But so yeah, and people, there was confusion because I guess in the legal terms in Florida, like that's a missile.
That's a missile, yeah.
And so people thought he threw like
tomahawk.
Yeah, like we're playing Mario Kart.
Yeah.
It's like no.
Yeah. I'll give you.
I don't believe he threw an actual missile.
I'm telling you, this one's off the wall. But this one, I loved that this guy played for the Braves. He played for a good chunk too. Julio Franco, the timeless wonder.
Good one.
Like I just, and he played a lot of his later years in Atlanta, and it's just like, I remember being like, no one knows how old he actually is, and he's like, again, another guy that when you think about how athletic and how more like, you know, speed, power, all that minded that the game is, a guy like Julio Franco wouldn't be sticking around right now at all. And the fact that he lasted as long as he did was always, I had a really soft spot for Julio Franco. Real soft spot there. Maddox would have probably been my pick for pitcher, and I probably could still go Maddox, but I wanted to throw in something fun.
If I wanted to go like off the board, you know, I would have probably thrown, because I think I've gotten 4 now. But like I would have thrown in like a Marcus Giles or
Marcus. I came very close to adding Marcus Giles.
Yunel Escobar could get some.
I'll give you one.
Like I thought Yunel Escobar, just based on his swing and like the contact, I thought this guy was going to be a huge power hitter at some point. And he was always an excellent like doubles hitter, but it never developed into over the wall superpower.
I really wish Andrelton Simmons would have been there longer. He was one that I loved. I will say though, my brother. One of my brothers, the brother closest to me in age, who was a big Andrew fan growing up. I don't know if his top 4, but I can tell you definitively, if Furcal might be in his top 4, I can tell you definitively, though, his top 2 are Andrew Jones and Andres Galarraga. He was a huge Andres Galarraga fan because when he played T-ball growing up in his age, he was the first baseman, and Galarraga was the first baseman of the Braves when he was around that time. And I'll give 4 quick ones. 4 new favorite Braves. I know I threw Acuna in there. But guys who are playing right now that I'm like big on, Spencer Strider, love that he's a complete weirdo and it's like I only need 2 pitches to be one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's coming back this week as well. Very excited for that. Michael Harris, I love Michael Harris. And I don't care as much as that he's not like a big time hitter right now, and he's been kind of slow start. He's a little struggling with it. Gold Glove caliber defense is something I will always appreciate.
I've really had fun lately. In fact, none of these guys I don't think are on the organization or in the organization anymore. But the Braves have had, and I'm not saying this is Smith-Shawver because I like Smith-Shawver.
Yeah.
But like the Braves have had pitchers who looked brilliant for a short or even an extended period of time, and then it felt like Mike Soroka is back, but Kyle Wright's Huascar.
I miss Huascar.
Huascar's a good example as well. But there have been multiple.
Bryce Elder. I know he got it back going, but yeah. And then 2 more Braves that I love right now. Drake Baldwin is becoming becoming my new favorite Brave. I love a catcher who can rake and needs to be in the lineup every day. And then finally, Daysbel Hernandez. Give me a journeyman reliever who finally gets his break. And Daysbel Hernandez, if you watch Daysbel Hernandez pitch, he's awesome because his whole thing is I'm going to throw it as hard as humanly possible, and I'm going to yell and talk into my glove after every inning. That, Dan, is the pinnacle. That is what I want every one of my high leverage relievers doing that. I want them throwing heat and looking like a crazy person after they get out of an inning.
Get the cool. Get the cool to shine. Get the cool. The cool to shine. Get the cool. Get the cool to shine. Get the cool. Get the cool to shine.
Get to the punk.